Okay, everybody. I think we've given people enough time. I'm sure we'll have some more people streaming in, but we would love to get started now. Thanks again for joining us. This is Monica Plaza. I head up business development and sales for Google Consumer Surveys. With me is also John Sadow, who also works in business development and sales. And what we'll be doing today is going through the methodology and some background about Google Consumer Surveys and how it came to be, and then doing a full walkthrough of how the actual product works and how it can work for you. So hopefully you'll leave here with a lot more information than you came in with, and would be ready to get going with using the product. We'll also save a lot of time at the end for questions. You can ask questions by just entering them into the chat box. There's quite a few people on the line, so rather than unmuting everybody and asking verbally, we'll just be repeating the questions for you in using chat. So thanks ahead of time for your questions, and hopefully we'll answer a lot of them as we go along. So hopefully you can all see the home screen of the PowerPoint presentation. It says 3 birds, 1 stone. You'll see in a moment why we call it presentation 3 birds, 1 stone, and really it's about solving problems for 3 different constituents with 1 product, which is really what we're doing with Google Consumer Surveys. So I'm going to dive right in and actually move forward 1 slide. Okay. So before we even talk about market research, which I know we're all here to talk about, and talk about the industry in general, I would actually like to talk a little bit about where this product came from and the problems it really was tried to solve at the beginning and as it evolved over into Google Consumer Surveys over time. So what you see on the screen here is a pretty common graph in the online advertising conversation about how content, as it moves from offline to online, moved from magazines and newspapers, et cetera, onto an online space. A lot of the dollars moved online as well. But the challenge with this movement, it's a good thing for information sharing and for Google as a whole. But what's really been the problem is that as the dollars move online and the eyeballs move online, the revenue really hasn't quite kept up with what it was offline for publishers, specifically in terms of subscription revenue and advertising revenue. And this has really caused a problem with the publishing community and the online publishing community in trying to keep the lights on and keep content fresh and unique and valuable for the audiences. And one of the things that's happened in the industry in terms of this dilemma is that the publishing world has really tried to come up with new ways to monetize the content and really keep the lights on. One of these ways is actually the idea of a paywall, which we're going to show you. You see an example on the screen. So what a paywall is, and I'm sure many of you are used to the concept, it's really a way to ask users to pay for content with their money, either with a subscription model or a pay-per-view or pay-per-piece of content model. The example you see on the screen here is the New York Times. It's quite a popular website and a pretty hot topic in the publishing world in terms of them implementing a paywall this year. And with a site like the New York Times or a site like the Wall Street Journal, which is another one you may be familiar with, these types of subscription models may work quite well. There's a loyal following, there's a lot of really unique content. People are willing to pay for it because it is the New York Times. But it doesn't really work for every type of unique and valuable content out there. Not every website is as large as the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. A study from Pew Research Center's Project for Excellence in Journalism last year found that actually as sites started to implement paywalls, a very, very small percentage of users were actually willing to pull up a credit card, type in the 16 digits, and pay for the content. Instead, they were leaving and finding their content elsewhere. This is not a good thing for publishers who are really trying to populate the internet with high-quality content. So a couple years ago, our 2 founders, who are now our product manager and our lead engineer, who worked on separate products and really just knew each other from a former role at Google, were concerned about this product, and this problem, and actually started emailing about how do we solve this issue of content starting to become blocked behind paywalls and behind apps and things like that, where Google is very, very much about the open internet. And they came up with this idea of, what if we can get a user of the internet to complete a task in order to pay for access to content rather than paying with their money? Things like answering a question in the case of market research, or other things that humans are better at accomplishing than a computer, something like labeling an image or categorizing a product into a product category. This was just an idea that they were bouncing around, and so they really started testing it out with some internal research teams and internal projects that were going on at Google. They partnered with some publishers. Huffington Post is a good example of a test publisher we worked with, and started to put up these tasks, these variety of tasks, in front of content and ask users to complete the task in order to access an article, a video, what have you. And they found that not only were users willing to do this, they were willing to do this at a very high rate, much higher than they were willing to pay. You saw that stat earlier from Pew. And what they also realized was among all of these different task options that were provided, questions, market research questions where you simply asked for an opinion were really performing the best and outperforming the other options. This is because users are really willing to, it's a very simple experience, you're very willing to provide your opinion if it's a simple consumer question. And it really, the trade-off is very valuable to a user. So they realized they were onto something and started focusing on this idea of market research as a means for paying for content. So that's kind of created this ecosystem that starts with the users and the publishers and actually completes with the market researchers, which really brings us to where we are today with this product. In essence, what our product is completely built upon is this ecosystem you see in front of you, which involves users answering questions to gain access to content, publishers making money off of these answers, in essence, monetizing their content without having to block it behind a paywall, and market researchers gaining very, very fast access to high-quality market research from the broader community on the internet. So everything we talk about today will really come back to this ecosystem, and every decision we make as a team and as a product really relies on keeping this ecosystem intact. So moving forward, just wait for my screen to refresh, there we go. So this is actually just a screenshot of how this looks in the wild, but I'm actually going to pull up a live version of these questions so you can really see how this works from a user and a publisher perspective. It really speaks for itself when you view it live. So just bear with us one moment as we pull up the browser. All right. There we go. Okay, so what you see in front of you is the New York Daily News. Some of you from the East Coast are probably very familiar with this website, or actually nationwide. This is one of the many publishers in our network. We've built actually a unique network specific to this product, simply because unlike in our ads world where we place ads in a variety of locations, we really are looking for specifically high-quality, unique content coming from premium publishers. So we have a network that involves large national publishers like the New York Daily News that you see in front of you, as well as other sites you may have heard of, Reader's Digest, for example, Christian Science Monitor, YouTube. We also work beyond news and into entertainment. I mentioned YouTube, as well as Pandora. We work with review sites such as Zagat, et cetera, et cetera. We also work with a lot of regional publications to get the geographic reach. We'll talk a little bit about why this diversity is important in a little bit, but just wanted to give you a little bit of a sample of the kinds of sites we work with. So this is an article in the New York Daily News, and like you might be used to with a paywall, I'm getting a little bit of a headline, an image, a sample of the article, and then I'm blocked. Before I can read the rest, you can see the rest is actually grayed out, including the images. Before I can move on, I actually am asked to take action. And in this case, with our product, the action is not to pay, but rather to answer a question. Here you actually see a great example of a two-question prompt. This is the highest number of questions any individual user will be asked to answer. And the reason for two questions in this case is what we call our screening question. And that will I'm sorry, we're just seeing that there's some issue with the sound. Apologies for one moment. All right, hopefully this will keep working. Apologies for that. So as you can see, there's two questions here. This is actually our screening question option, which basically is a targeting option we have. We'll talk a little bit about how you can target in the future later on in this presentation, but bottom line is no user will be asked to answer more than two questions. In essence, it's a very simple experience for a user to complete. So I'm going to actually answer this question honestly. So did I buy a laptop for the back-to-school season this year? No, I actually did not. And I'm getting a second question. How often do I get delivery or pickup for dinner? Not too often. I will say, let's say once a month, actually. We really don't do that very often at my house. Great. So as I answer the question, the content is actually becoming available. And what this really does, you can see as we scroll down, what this really does is give me access with 10 seconds of my time rather than dollars or pennies. So this is just a live example of how this works, but really what matters is what happens after I answer this question in terms of market research and the research you all are looking to accomplish on our product. So we can actually go back to the presentation and talk a little bit about what happens when I answer that question. Great. Okay, so what you all saw happen live is I saw two questions and I answered them, and that's great. Someone out there was asking about my laptop purchase as well as my delivery behavior. and they got some valuable information. But they didn't know much about me. You didn't see me answer any questions about who I am and where I am. We actually take a very innovative approach to solving this problem and enabling us to ask the 1 or 2 question maximum microsurvey. And we do this through technology. So the first thing you see on the screen is DoubleClick. DoubleClick is a company that Google purchased a few years ago, and we leveraged the technology for many different ads purposes in our AdWords side of our business. But we actually take advantage of the DoubleClick cookie for this product as well. It's a pretty standard implementation that we use for ads in terms of targeting advertising to particular profiles. And we're actually using it in reverse here. So when you browse the internet, and the DoubleClick cookie, we're having some issues, on the WebEx end. Cool. When you browse the internet and see a variety of websites, the DoubleClick cookie actually picks up on patterns completely anonymously, picks up on your patterns and starts to recognize who you are in terms of your age and gender. It's a very, very smart algorithm that's just getting better over time. We validated it quite a bit with our demographics team. And what basically this allows us to do is infer your age and gender and attach it to your responses. So even though I only answered 2 questions, the system actually knows that I am likely female and that I'm likely of a certain age range with a high percentage of accuracy. We also take it a step further and take advantage of the industry standard IP lookup, which is a common technology used for understanding where someone is located. So my zip code was actually logged as well. So the system doesn't only know that I'm a female of a certain age range, actually knows that I'm in California, not only California, down to the zip code that I'm currently sitting in. We also take advantage of some census information. Now that we know the zip code of the respondent, we actually can take the urban density of that zip code, is it an urban area, a rural area, or a suburban area, as well as the average household income in that area, and attach all 5 pieces of information to my responses. So in essence, even though I answered a 2-question survey, it's as if I answered a 7-question survey in this case. Furthermore, we use this information to allow you to target to particular groups, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and it allows us to build a very representative sample of the population by not just asking the first 1,000 people we find, but rather building in real time, building a smart sample of the appropriate age, gender, and geographic mix for the target population, specifically in the U.S. with the current product. So moving forward, I'm just going to summarize what we really just talked about, which is this is a very, very simple process. We do a lot of the work for you in terms of sampling and building rep sample, finding your respondents quickly, and building the incentive program behind it, which in this case involves access to content. So how it really works is you go online. It is a self-service tool. You go online to build surveys. People complete questions to access the content, as you saw me do. Publishers make a little bit of money. And most importantly, you get back not just a bunch of raw data that you have to work with yourself, you actually get back fully analyzed data along with insights and the ability to cross-tab by demographic, all of which we'll talk about in a moment. So moving forward. Okay, so we're actually going to switch gears here, step away from the deck and actually start moving into some of the live demo. First, we're going to start here on our website. This is our homepage. You can see the URL at the top. Feel free to write that down. It's also very easy to find by just searching consumer surveys at google.com. It will be the first result. And what you see here, just to give you the lay of the land, on our homepage, you'll just get some nice a carousel of a variety of different case studies from early on, as well as a video. And the video that you see here, it was just on the screen with the little play button. What that basically is a nice 1-minute, 15-second version of what I just went through on how this works and how we built this sample. So feel free to share this with your colleagues or clients if you're a researcher, just to help them understand the basics of how this works. To get into more detail, we also have a How It Works tab that you're welcome to peruse. That's where you'll see a lot of what we just talked about in terms of methodology, and that's also where you'll go to find our white paper. So a lot of us want to get a little bit more academic and a little bit more nitty-gritty with the methodology. Our white paper can be found at the bottom of the How It Works tab, as well as the bottom of this homepage. When you see How It Works, you can get to that page. Finally, you see some information on pricing. We're going to cover that in our demo. You also see case studies, also a great way to see sort of how other companies have used our product in the past, and a bunch of example surveys. It really helps to see different sets of results and play around with it live before you move forward with your own surveys. So something for you to check out later, but instead what we're going to do now is switch gears and jump into the survey creation tools. You can see how easy it is to create and launch your surveys yourself. And then we're going to play around with some results so you can see exactly how we analyze the data for you, the kinds of information we give you, and how interactive our experience really is. So I'm actually going to pass it over to my colleague, John, who's going to take you through the walkthrough.
Thanks, Monica. So we know, first off, I know some of you are probably having some audio issues. We're doing our best in our setup to have things come through as cleanly as possible. If you have any questions on things that maybe you don't hear or don't sound that clear coming through, definitely just send over a chat and we'll do our best to backtrack where needed. There are a couple of questions that came through about the demographics in particular that take a minute to talk about before we go further, just to set a good backdrop. So overall, there was a bunch of questions about how we know the accuracy of the demographics, to what level can we confirm the accuracy. So we actually have a demographics team here at Google that works full-time at trying to optimize our demographics and ensuring that our algorithm continues to improve and get smarter over time. As you can imagine, since we use this for our ads business, that's a pretty important focal point of that offering. So as far as accuracy goes, accuracy is in the 80 to 90+% range for both age and gender. And so we're pretty happy with those rates given that they are inferred demographics. And zip code accuracy is actually usually typically more accurate than even the age and gender demographics. So there was a question about IP being dynamic, but generally speaking, our IP lookup should be able to trace back to your zip code. And of course, that's all anonymized and very private, so there's no concern about privacy overextension there. So it looks like someone may have missed the age and gender, so 80 to 90% on both age and gender. For Canada, there's also some questions about overseas. We'll talk about this more later, but we're just in the process of beginning targeting and our expansion outside of the United States. So we're in the process of doing validation and demographic validation in those places, so we don't have any numbers that we can yet share publicly. But as we expand beyond the United States, you should hear more about that as we go further. The final question was about, two more questions. So one was about how we confirm the accuracy of income and urban density. So those are actually our most accurate in the sense that those are pulled straight from the census data and overlapped with the zip code information that we determined from IP lookup. So all we're doing is matching a zip code to the quoted information that we have from the census for income and urban density. And then the final question was about shared computers. So the big thing about the way that we infer demographics and the reason why our accuracy levels are so high is because we look for statistically significant trends in that data. So if we look and see that some percentage of time was spent visiting what may look like female-specific sites or male-specific sites or younger versus older, we often won't come to a conclusion on who that person is if we're not sure about the statistical significance of that demographic, in which case those demographics would simply be unknown and we wouldn't consider them for reweighting or similar things. And that applies to work computers as well. So we look for statistically significant trends across any computer or set of users, and we do our best to make sure that those people do exceed the averages when we try to infer those demographics. And then all in all, the way that we've thought about this is we've done a series of validation, and we do ongoing validation, and our studies continue to show that we can accurately sort of match up to quoted incidence rates from the CDC and other things like you might see in our white paper. So that's, in our opinion, the best way for us to validate these types of demographics and the overall accuracy of the product.
And just to close out on that before we move forward, obviously we're very pleased with the accuracy, as John just mentioned, across the board. However, we very much recognize that these are inferred, and there is a trade-off built into this product, that the speed and the ability to reach a variety of people who are not necessarily part of a panel or incentivized in any way is really the trade-off between the 100% self-reported and the inferred. However, the difference between self-reported and inferred is quite small in what we've seen in our validation, and there are ways using our screening questions to get to a very specific self-reported audience if need be for a particular facet. But bottom line is we're pleased with how it works, and it really is a nice trade-off that comes along with our product.
So there are a bunch of new questions coming in. I'm going to hold off on those so that we can handle those at the end, just to keep going a little bit with the presentation, and then we'll get back to questions on. There are some things about validation and other questions coming through that we'll spend some time talking about at the end of the presentation. So now I'm going to jump and show sort of a little bit more about our survey creator, which I think will help us talk about the types of targeting options, types of question options, and more about sort of overall the performance of the platform, less so, of course, than actually the process of creating a survey. So if I were to click on this blue Create Survey button, this would bring me into sort of our Create Survey interface. I actually have one preloaded just to help us have a good backdrop for the sake of the presentation. And so I'm going to walk through a survey that is a fun look at maybe evaluating various market preferences and gathering insights in the dog toy industry from dog owners. So in this particular survey, we're starting off on the very same screen that you would start at if you were building your own survey, if you had followed that blue link from the homepage. And as you can expect, if you're familiar with any Google products, from Gmail to Google Calendar to just a Google search, you'll see that the user interface is pretty easy and intuitive to get through. So the first step here is really just about creating your baseline survey. So adding a name for your survey. You see here that I've called this the dog toy survey or dog toy survey. You can add a description, maybe some tags as well. The description and tagging is really just for you to organize your own surveys and for you to keep track of maybe different projects, different brands, maybe different purchase orders or clients if you're working with various clients. And then from here, you can also see that we have options for copying if you have existing surveys that you're just trying to duplicate. One thing you don't see here that should be coming out soon is the ability to schedule certain surveys. So in a similar vein to copying surveys, you may want to set up a brand tracker or something that you're tracking on a weekly or biweekly or monthly basis. So soon we should have the ability for you to create a survey and then preload that to run at some specified time over the coming weeks and months so that you can collect data without always having to come back in here and recreate a new survey. So I'm going to jump forward here into the second step, which is really the first of the two sort of main steps of the survey creation process. So this will let us talk a little bit about the different types of targeting we have and how that works in our interface. So here you can see we have three targeting options. The first, as with most survey platforms, is going to be your typical general population, or in our case, the U.S. internet population. You can see here a little bit of information about the pricing. So one of the key focal points of our product is to be as affordable as possible for the research community to get data out there and to collect data back. So our general population starts at just 10 cents per response, and that's of course per question. And then you can see here one of the more interesting facets of our general population is the way that we're able to aggregate the audience segments. So Monica talked a lot about the inferred demographics and the way that we use cookie and IP lookup to source those demographics. In our general population survey, even if you're just asking one question, you're going to get all of these different audience segments back in that data. So you'll see in a few minutes when we get to the analysis that you can actually cross-tabulate and segment the data by these audience segments without ever having asked any of these questions, and you can actually slice the data directly in our platform, which is what you'll see when we get to the example results. So this is general population. The final thing here to take away is that we do automatically balance the distribution of this survey on the back end. So this is where we take a little bit of magic on our side, and we make sure that we're delivering the survey to the right people to match that distribution of the U.S. internet population to help us collect that data as accurately and as quickly as possible. A general population survey question of, say, 1,000 or 1,500 responses usually will come back in under a day and a half. In fact, a survey that has multiple questions going to the general population, we could do 4, 5, 6 questions likely within 24 to 48 hours. So as far as speed, as hopefully you've come to be familiar with Google, that's definitely one of the advantages of the platform that we really stress to users like all of you. So in addition to this general population setting, we also have two sort of more advanced types of targeting or more specific types of targeting. The first is, as you might expect, an audience based on various demographic or geographic characteristics. So this is where you can decide, I only am looking for women that are 45 plus, or perhaps you're looking for a particular region or a particular state within the country. And then over time, you can see that hopefully this would expand to targeting overseas or outside of the United States. And then eventually we do hope to have DMA and zip level targeting. So as you can imagine, our state level targeting is really just an aggregate of those zips that are within that state. And so as our publisher network evolves and we grow and have greater reach, we should hopefully be able to enable congressional districts and DMAs and various types of targeting for more specific surveys. The final type of targeting here is where we bring a little bit of customization or custom segmentation into the platform, and there are probably some questions out there about, well, how can we use branching logic and how can we use different types of skip logic and more complex survey design to enhance our surveys? because the unique thing about our model is that we only do one question at a time, we're sourcing different question respondents from a different group of people. So we don't facilitate the types of branching and logic perhaps you're used to. We do have hopes and plans in the future to, if possible, expand to more than one or two questions in a variety of forms. But currently, the screening question is the way that we add a little bit of depth to those type of questions with still being able to stick within our 1 to 2 question model. So here, this is a dog toy survey. I'm really only interested in folks who own a dog. So you can see I can build a question where I'm asking if someone owns a dog, and I have a yes or no answer with a flagged response around the yes. So what's going to happen here is users might come to read an article. They'll see one of our survey prompts. If they answer yes to this screening question, they might then get they will then get one of the follow-up questions from my survey. If they answer no, they'll then get another question from someone else's survey, and of course we won't charge you for that response. So we incur the cost of filtering out for your target audience, and that's how you're able to do more custom segmentation. So that's a little bit about our different types of audience targeting and audience selection. And between the 3 options, we think it gives a pretty good variety and depth for most research needs. Of course, there are times where very specific low incidence groups or multi-question surveys are required, and of course there are plenty of platforms that might be better for those particular types of surveys. If you're thinking about speed as a key characteristic, if you're thinking about really tapping into a market at large, so a larger response base, those are some of the things that we think about as far as sort of the great value adds of our platform. So, and the final thing here is to just touch on, you saw that with the general population, it was a 10 cents per response, and then when you kick up to a demographic or a custom targeting option, it's more 50 cents per response. So that puts a little bit in perspective in terms of price. Of course, with the more advanced targeting, you're looking at smaller populations, so you typically need fewer responses for a particular survey. So I know there are a lot of questions coming in. Just to let you know, we do see them. We will get to them at the end. We just want to move forward a little bit to get through the rest of the demo. So I'm going to move forward with the screening question and tax. So, the 50 cents is per response. 50 cents per response. We're looking for a flagged answer of yes. And then I'll walk you through what the survey creation tool might actually look like. So here we're on step 3. We're looking at writing questions, the novelty of which is not so high, but the way that the survey comes together is sort of the interesting piece here to show. So, of course, if I wanted to add a question, we've got this variety of questions that are available. We've got your multiple choice and your multiple selection, a variety of different large image questions, some with multiple image selection, some with an image with a drop-down. So we can handle everything from logo testing. We've done some ad testing, different creative messages, thoughts and feelings based on an image. We've got your standard sort of rating questions. We've just recently launched an open-ended numeric question. So this is for, pricing expectations or other numeric entry type questions. And you're actually getting a little bit of a look behind the scenes here where we are working on open-ended text and hoping to have that sometime in the next few weeks or month or two. And that's where, of course, you can collect free response entries, and then we'll do some advanced, clustering and synonymization and things like that to help you bubble up the top responses. So these are the type of questions that you might see, and then I'm gonna walk through this survey just quickly to show you how you can have a variety of different questions in one survey. So here you can see we have 8 questions in this survey. Each of these questions will go out to, say, 1,000 different respondents. Each of them will have first seen that screening question. And you can see that we have here a multiple choice question, and the second question we have a free response, an open-ended numeric question. We also have a question about images, so you get an example here of, in this particular question, we're looking to define which toy people prefer. So you can actually see the preview here in the survey creator of what that will look like in the wild. So you can see here, it's a pretty typical rollover type selection tool. So you can roll over and look at different images, and then you can click on the answer when you're ready for it. And so you can see, again, here's a multiple selection example. Here's another multiple choice example. We're all asking different things, gathering different insights from dog owners about their preference in dog toys. And most importantly, again, you're going to get all of these questions to go out there, but without needing one respondent to answer each of these 8 questions. There seem to be a couple of questions coming in about sort of the one-at-a-time model. You are correct in that each question is going to be answered by a different group of respondents, and we know that this is a little bit different than what you're used to. And I think that sort of the challenge that we've put out to the folks that we've worked with, and something that's really important to the sort of the founders of our team, is we're really trying to be respectful of the respondent experience and the user experience. So we want to make sure that respondents are in an environment where they're comfortable giving the most honest answers they can, that they're not saddled with a 25-question survey, that you can be very confident that they're giving you the right answer. And also, of course, we want to create a consistent user experience so that folks don't feel that they're spending an inordinate amount of their time providing data in order to read an article or watch a video. And so the advantage there, of course, is we're able to get back data very, very, very quickly. And really, from start to finish of a survey, we're able to, to do things in a matter of days, as opposed to a matter of weeks and months, which is sort of the typical status quo for these long-form surveys that are sort of the normal convention, maybe out in the panel world or through other outlets. So now that I've walked through the question creation tool, I'm going to move forward here to the last step. And again, I see more questions coming in about the question creation. We'll definitely get there. And you'll see here that there are a variety, or here on the final page, we're getting a variety of sort of different pieces of data. You're getting the overview of your type of survey, the target answer for your screening question, an overview of the questions, and then here you have the number of responses that you're looking for and a quoted price across all of those questions. So remember, this is a screening question, so we're looking at 50 cents a question, at 500 responses, etc. And so this is sort of how your survey comes about. If I click Buy Now, you'll see a Google Wallet interface where I can pay via credit card if I'd like to. We do have invoicing available on a limited basis, so if that seems like something that would be required for your usage, that's something that you can always contact Monica and myself about after the presentation and going forward. So I'm going to actually skip out now and go back to our homepage. And from here, I'm actually going to show you how to find the results to that particular survey that I just walked through, and actually just walk through a little bit about our results as a whole and what our user interface looks like for analysis. So I'm going to go into our example survey section, which is here at the top of our navigation bar, and you'll see that here at the top of this example surveys list is dog toys. So if you click into this dog toy survey, you'll be able to see what a sort of survey overview page looks like. This is the kind of thing that you'll get once you've created a survey. And you can see the same questions that we've just looked at, but you're going to see a little bit of high level about the different sort of data points. So you're going to see what the answer is if we've come up with one already. You can see down here it's still too close to call between two of the options. You'll see some information about the insights, which we'll talk about, and of course the responses that we collected. And you might, in some cases, see that we've collected more responses than even the quoted amount that you paid for. Of course, you only have to pay for that volume of responses up front, so any additional sample is, frankly, it's on us. So I'm going to jump in and actually show you now what some of this data looks like in the results form. So you've heard us talk a little bit about speed and the ease of use of the product. I would say, second to that, as you might expect, being that we're Google, the analysis portion and sort of the technical power behind the way that we're able to sort of present and evaluate the data is really one of the things that we're most proud of, one of the things that I think you can expect for us to continue to improve and to innovate on. So this is the kind of output that you're going to see for every question. You're going to see your bar charts with your upper and lower confidence intervals. You're going to see all kinds of different metrics about the response collection in the sample. So here you'll see a histogram of response times. I think earlier there may have been a question about how do we prevent against people answering just the first answer every time? Well, one of the cool things that we're able to do is actually take this data where we look at response times and actually clean the sample as it comes. So you'll see here that we actually don't have any response times before a certain number or before a certain number of seconds. And that's because if a user tries to answer a question too quickly, which is typically the case if they go for the first answer, not only will we first require them to try again, we'll actually tell them, hey, maybe you should slow down and take a second to answer the question. But we'll then, if the data still comes back too quickly, we'll actually throw that sample out on the fly. So we have a whole back-end system set up to detect spammy responses, which in addition to typical answer randomization and other practices, allows us to find users who perhaps aren't taking time to read the question. And actually over time, we'll profile those users and stop including their sample from any questions. You can also see information about the responses by hour of day, by day of week, the overall response rate. Down here you have some information about where those responses came from in terms of the publisher category. And then here you're actually able to look at how well we were able to distribute that sample to, in this case, a general population of the public that looks like the U.S. internet population. as this is the screening question. So the screening question went out to the general population, so that's who we're balancing against. And you can actually see our RMSE score, or the root mean square error here, is actually quite low, which means that our reweighting is nominal. We don't have to do too much reweighting. And our ability to find the right distribution in the wild is quite effective. So that's a little bit about the nuts and bolts of the different types of answers. And now I'll just sort of keep walking through a little bit about our interface, and then we'll maybe take some time to look through some of these questions. So probably the coolest thing, as you've heard us talk about a few times here, is the demographic aspect of our survey collection. So here on the left-hand side, you can see this demographics panel, which actually helps you slice and dice this data directly in the interface on the fly. So let's say we want to look at dog ownership compared by age. All we have to do is click compare under the age section, and we can actually look immediately in the interface at how these things break down by age. And then if we wanted to layer on, let's say, a region of the country, we can layer that out as well and see how perhaps the data changes. So you can see that it's really easy to mine the data, and one of the things that we sort of focus on here is we'd like to help people focus on coming up with the insights from the data, perhaps a little bit more importantly than just dealing with the data offline. Now, of course, I think maybe a question came through about this already, but we do allow you to export the CSV data as you might like. We also let you grab the images or the images with the results table, but we're trying to help folks get to the what to do with the data point probably as quickly as possible, as opposed to sometimes spending more time just building graphs and looking for insights. And we've actually taken that a step further, and we actually have this insights section of our results where we've gone ahead and looked for statistically significant insights with a p-value, p-value of 0.02, so high confidence insights that we found looking through this data already. So here you can see that we have all of these various insights that we've pulled out from this question of, are you a dog owner, yes or no? You can actually sort these insights by different demographic characteristics, so we can look at the insights by age. And so here we find that age affected how many people picked yes to owning a dog. So this insight's been pulled for you. You can click into this insight and go straight back into the actual analysis view and see what that insight looks like. All the different sort of knobs and bolts are turned here so that you can see what that view should look like. And of course, if you want to grab that image, it's really easy to take down and look at maybe in deck form to share with the client, to share with other stakeholders on your team. So again, making the research process as seamless as possible and allowing you to say, okay, if we know that, for example, age matters in dog ownership, what can we do about it? So I'm just going to quickly cycle through a few of these questions so you can actually see what that looks like in terms of analyzing data for multiple questions. You can see we have the histograms for our multiple choice questions. For our open-ended numeric, you can see we've actually gone ahead and automatically bracketed this or stratified the data collection. We've got information about the averages and also the breakdown by pricing bracket. This is a question about what you would spend on a dog toy. And each question has, as I just showed, the different insights that you can dive into. So again, you're going to see that here, income affected how people said that they would pay for a dog. Perhaps not a surprising insight for this particular question, but of course, if there's something you're investigating where you don't know the answer, this might make it quite easy for you to get straight to an interesting sort of nuance or nugget in that data that you can then do something off of. So we're going to wrap up here as we sort of cycle through a couple more of these questions that really gives you a sense of the platform from top to bottom. I know that there are quite a few questions that we're going to do our best to get through now, but feel free to go ahead and write in a question as it comes to you, and we'll sort of just start going down this list and answering as many as we can.
We'll try to bucket them as best we can to avoid answering the same question multiple times. So bear with us as we read through a lot of these.
So it looks like there might have been a question earlier on about people clearing their cookies. Believe it or not, by and large, the data shows that most people do not clear their cookies until their browser does it for them automatically, upwards of the vast majority of folks. And of course, we're looking, especially in our demographic collection, for people who do have those cookies. So this may be a good chance to talk about how many people we actually see each month. So as many of you know, most of the largest online panels are maybe in the high 100,000s. Maybe a couple have active panels of 1 million plus. We're actually delivering over 4 million prompts a month with an average response rate of roughly 20 to 30%, so let's say 25%. So we're actually collecting over 1 million answers a month at this point. And of course, we're only in month 4, so we do expect that to grow and for our publisher platform to grow. And ultimately, what we find is of that 1 million some odd respondents, the vast majority of those are actually unique. So we're seeing a ton of new folks who are actually getting, in a certain sense, we're putting the market back in the market research component. And that way, if people don't have cookies or clear their cookies, there are plenty of other folks out there that we can find that do have cookie information available. So we're just going to scroll down this list and see if there are any
There's a few here I see around the theme. I think John probably covered it after the questions were asked, but just to close out on the theme of building a rep sample and what we mean by that. As John showed you in the bias table at the bottom of every result page, we take a look at the CPS data. It's the current population survey. It's a supplement to the U.S. Census. I believe our data is from 2011, so it's very fresh. It's basically the breakdown across age, gender, and geographic region for the U.S. internet population. So one thing to clarify is we are representative of the U.S. internet population, being that we are an internet survey. And what our system does is in real time, as users and possible respondents come across a prompt, our system will deliver the right question to them in terms of which survey and which sample needs that individual most. So what we end up doing is building a very close to accurate, very, very close to the breakdown of the CPS data sample that allows us to reweight only slightly, but we do reweight at that point to actually match the CPS data. And as you probably can see, I think you still can see on the screen that you can toggle weighting on and off, although the closer we are, the less difference that toggle makes. So I hope that answers a lot of questions about the rep sample and where we're getting that information, but that's how we build it. We base it on census data.
So just going through the list here, and apologies if these are a little varietal in nature. There's a bunch of different questions coming in about a bunch of different topics. So one was about mobile devices and different browsers, and how are we able to, or are we able to target folks on different browsers or on mobile devices? So in a nutshell, anyone with what we call modern browser is able to use our interface as far as building a survey out. So it works for Chrome, Firefox, it works for Safari. The limitation there is that Internet Explorer versions earlier than Internet Explorer 9, if you already have it, really aren't compatible with the kind of sort of tech engine that we're using. However, our prompts are compatible across all browsers. So you will see prompts whether you're using Internet Explorer, Safari, or Firefox, or Chrome. And so you will see data will be collected from an even sample of different browsers. Currently, we don't ask questions on mobile devices. We have done some testing on mobile, but questions will only be seen on sites that are accessed by a desktop computer or by a tablet. But the mobile devices are definitely a platform that we want to expand to. So we do have some ideas on how we're going to do that, and we're hoping that between now and the end of the year, we'll have a platform that will allow you to target or segment results based on information collected on a mobile device.
Seems to be a few questions that probably from earlier in the presentation, but definitely a few questions on the number of questions a user will see. Just to clarify, I'm sure this has come across now. No user will see more than 1 or 2 questions, 2 only in the case of screening questions, and they will not be answering multiple questions in a survey, so they're not going to be filtered through. Now, there was another question that came up: is it completely different samples for each question, and therefore, more females on one, more males on another, and therefore it's hard to compare? What I mentioned earlier about building a rep sample, we take that same approach for each and every question. So while each question is answered by different individuals, the sample is very, very similar in their makeup, and then reweighted to be even more similar. So you would not have one of your survey questions answered by 75% women or anything like that, especially after reweighting. So at the end of the day, it's very similar looking samples across your questions that you can at least compare, maybe not through branching, but at least compare the results to each other.
So a couple other questions, just some miscellaneous ones here. One was asking about how we compare our survey system to that of Amazon, which I assume you're meaning Mechanical Turk. I think rather than, not to spend too much time talking about their platform, but more on ours, I think the unique thing or the major difference is we've really gone out to build a survey platform that is sort of statistically sound and robust in its feature set. So all of the different types of back-end delivery mechanisms, all of the reweighting, all of the balancing of our product, the way that we collect data is a little bit less about the task itself and more about the general ecosystem. So I think that's how we see our platform differentiating from, specifically from that platform and any others that perhaps are collecting in this manner, really, if you compare to like intercept surveys or interstitials or things like that. So there's another question here was about slowing survey sample down. So maybe some folks want to collect their data over a period of time, over a week, to get balanced sample. This isn't something that we do or have the option for in the interface. If there's a particular project where you need it to be spread out, that's something you can definitely chat with us offline and engage us about. What's funny there actually is we actually had to slow things down to be able to spread it out over a day and a half. We have seen, when it was unfettered, we'd actually seen some surveys return 1,500 responses in as little as, say, 5 or 6 hours. So we do try to expand it over at least a day and a half to make sure that we're not introducing any bias by day of week or time of day.
And one more quick thing on the spreading out the responses. When we built this and introduced this scheduling option that John mentioned, there is definitely a chance down the road that will also be included. The idea of not only do I want it to start at this point, but I want it to run over the course of, say, these days, if there's an event coming up or something that you want to get a pre-post. Now, that's not available yet in the interface, as John mentioned, but likely will be, along with lots of other things we're planning on doing over the next year or so.
There's a question here about how our platform is based on an initial assumption that our survey and our data collection is from users who look to receive premium content, and that we assume that they look like a representative sample. So this is a great question, and actually this was the original premise that we set out to prove long before we launched the product. So, of course, our product never would have come to market if we weren't confident that the results were as accurate and in fact, really more accurate than any of the comparable products that are out there. And the best way that we were able to verify that our sample is representative is by comparing our sample to quoted incidence rates in the population. So if you look at our white paper, you'll see that we're looking at asthma rates from the CDC and smoking behavior and things that have a documented incidence in the U.S. population, so that we can prove that our sample does indeed reflect those incidence rates. So I encourage you to check out the white paper. We are working on some validation with some folks out in the research space, so hopefully you'll hear more about that in the coming months. You'll see the kinds of other validation that we're doing in terms of similar incidence and quantifiable rates. But generally, the best way that we can confirm that assumption is just by the testing that we've done, and we encourage you to do the same. Actually, one of the cool things, I'm gonna change back to the yes or no question on the dog survey, is one of the cool things about this is if you compare our yes rate to the Humane Society's quoted or estimated dog ownership rates, you'll find that we're well within the statistical margin of error of that rate, and we find that we're consistently hitting those numbers from one question to another when it comes to representativeness.
And to clarify one thing on our publisher network, while we do use the term premium because we're talking about sites that we take a lot of quality control to verify that they are high quality and the content is unique, these are not all sites that were behind a paywall. In fact, the majority of our sites were not behind a paywall prior to working with us. These are simply sites looking to monetize and that we believe are high value enough to monetize in this way. So in building this diverse sample of news sites, video sites, entertainment sites, rating sites, other sorts of niche sites, we've actually distributed this network very, very smartly. We actually have a counterpart team that does that. That's their role, is to really build this network in a very smart way. So I don't want anyone to be misled by the idea of premium. This is not one type of site. This is really a variety of sites, and the main common thread is that they're high quality and they're not just your run-of-the-mill blog. That's basically the way we're using premium here. Which one? Matrix Style? Okay. So there's a couple questions here on just question types. One is, are there matrix style questions possible? I'll expand that to just other types of question types. Basically, what John showed you was a variety of different question types that are available. Some involve images, some involve ratings, et cetera, et cetera. Those are what's available right now. We are working on open-ended, as John mentioned. Things like matrix or other very complicated individual question types that take quite a long time, take up a lot of space to really get the message across. Those are the ones that are going to be a little bit harder for us to fit in our prompt and feel that we are keeping that ecosystem intact. As you saw in one of the earlier slides, if a user is willing to answer it, the publishers are getting high response rates and therefore monetizing well, and researchers are getting their responses back with high accuracy, we'll consider that question type. But a matrix question and things like that with maybe a video stimulus or things like that are a little bit more difficult to fit into that ecosystem. So never say never, but for right now, they're not possible.
There are a couple other questions here that hopefully I think we can answer quite quickly. We're coming up on the hour, so I'm going to try and rifle through a couple of these real fast. So one of the questions was about coupling questions with questions from another client. So there is the possibility that if you're using a screening question and someone answers a question or gives an answer that is not one of your target answers, that the subsequent question will be from someone else's survey. We find that the randomization in that practice shouldn't throw off any of the data. but generally it is possible in theory that you would be coupled with some other question. We've talked a lot about how we define a representative sample, how we use reweighting to make sure that if one question versus another question had a couple more females or a couple more males, that everything was reweighted and therefore normalized to compare one to the other. There was another question about top-line answers versus actual data. We do aggregate the data when we display it in our interface. Of course, you can always download the Excel spreadsheet if you want to look at the line-by-line answer distribution. Let's see, there's a couple others here. There's one about managing demographic quotas when the surveys are in the field. So this is, if you want to hit a certain demographic quota, then we would encourage you to use our demographic targeting. As far as managing quotas for a general population survey, that's something that our backend should do for you as we try to distribute according to the U.S. internet population. Let's see.
We'll try to cover a couple more, and we'll also possibly put together any sort of FAQs that we maybe didn't cover and try to send them out to attendees. What we got? Okay, so someone wanted clarification on the 4 million a month. What John was talking about there was there are about 4 million or so users across our different publishers who see a prompt in front of them at some point in time over a given month. Our response rates are averaging about 25%, so about a quarter of those people are actually answering the question rather than leaving or taking the alternative action, et cetera. So that's where the 4 million comes from. So we're seeing about 1 million unique respondents a month, and so we're obviously very diverse in our sample size.
There's another question, a couple questions about how we target certain publishers or how we develop the content that we're targeting for paying for access, i.e. what is premium content. So we actually have a whole counterpart team on our end that's working to build a publisher network. We've hand-picked and hand-developed each of the publishers in our network, the 50 plus that are live, and then an equal amount, if not more, that are sort of in queue to join our network. And so those are all premium publishers that we feel sort of provide a user experience that merits the type of ecosystem that we're building. And then there's a follow-up question here about matching content to the survey topic. So we don't allow for certain targeting of publishers or contextual matching of content. And the reason there is because for most of you out there, you're familiar that we don't want to bias the data unintentionally by putting it on certain types of content. The example that was given is if you're looking for people in financial services or asking about financial services, you probably don't want just folks who are reading an article, maybe they're college kids reading about something related, to that demographic. Well, that's why we use our screening question, and actually our algorithm is smart enough to go find people who are going to actually hit your flagged answer on the screening question over time. So we are able to find the folks that you need. So I guess our message here is let us do the work in finding the right audience that you're looking for, as opposed to risking the validity of your sample by looking for certain publishers or certain contextual matching.
We see a few questions about internationalization. That's a common question. We are doing tests currently in a couple non-U.S. English-speaking countries, specifically Canada and the UK. It's not a public product yet, but it is something we are hoping to make public and in a short period of time, the next few months. We will then continue to roll out slowly over the course of the next year to a variety of other countries. We definitely are planning on internationalizing. It's just we have to build the infrastructure for each of the individual locations. So. And one quick thing that follows all these questions, we do have a Google Plus page that will actually be the place where all updates and new features that are launched are publicized. So I do encourage you to find us on Google Plus and add us in order to keep up with these updates.
And of course, you can always feel free to contact us. You should have our information from the email invite that went out. And many of these questions, if we don't have the chance to answer them, or if you have particular questions about a project or particular custom needs, you can always feel free to reach out to Monica and myself to help you with those. We'll just keep going with some questions. If you have to drop off, that's totally fine. We'll just go through these while people hang around. And then, of course, again, thank you all for coming today. You should have a coupon from the original email that you got regarding this webinar in the first place. So hopefully you have the chance to try out the platform. And again, don't be strangers. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time. Couple more questions, so I'm just going to keep going here. So there's a couple questions about can survey results be made public. That is an option. You can make your survey results public for us to list on our site or to share around with specific folks who have the link. There is a difference between making a survey public and then sharing the link to that survey. Both are options. There was a few other questions about how we're able to target mobile devices, or how we plan to do that. That would likely be in an app form. So I can't share too much more about that, but we do have interest in helping monetize the app space as well as we do in terms of online publishing as well. Just looking through a couple more of these questions, and then we'll probably close up. Oh, there was a question about the probability sampling nature of our platform. So not to bore too many folks with the statistics here, but we are definitely not a convenience-based sampling or an opt-in-based sampling platform. We are most closely in line with a probability sampling method. We work with a bunch of statisticians and experienced mathematics folks on our end, both at Google and outside of Google. Essentially, we look like a probability-based sample in the way that theoretically all users or all internet users have the possibility of coming across our prompt. And really the challenge that we put out there is, are there any platforms, even including perhaps random digit dialing, where it's a true probability sample as per what a textbook might say. But generally speaking, we consider ourselves to be as near to a probability sample as you might ask for, and therefore that's why our validity is reflected in the accuracy that we see in our results. I don't think there are many other questions. Oh, timeline on expansion. I think you can see English-speaking non-US countries later this year. So UK, Canada, maybe Australia, and other parts of Europe, and then hopefully foreign language access in Asia, Europe, and LATAM. Hopefully, if not a little bit by the end of the year, then definitely in 2013. Final question here. It looks like there was a question about survey collection and how the data comes in. Data is given back to you as the survey data is collected. So if you create a survey, you're likely to see some information populate within a few hours, and we'll actually update the results in real time as we go. And then finally, access and ownership of the data. When you give us, when you create the survey and collect the data, we are given ownership of the data, but we grant you sort of an unconditional license to use it, present it, share it as you please. And of course, we'll never use that data or present that data publicly without your permission. As you can imagine, sort of data protection on Google's end is pretty important, and we keep this just as sacred as all the other information that comes through. Looks like we're getting just a couple more questions here. So one about B2B research. We'll be the first to admit that in many cases this is a little bit tough for B2B research. For example, you might use a screening question to collect incidents about people in the construction industry. As far as that goes, or that kind of incidents, if the incidence rate is particularly low, we likely won't be able to sort of accommodate that type of survey. But over time, we're hoping that our publisher network will expand to the point where we can do some of those low incidence and therefore B2B style research questions over time. But if the B2B is a large market, maybe you're looking at certain industries that have a higher incidence rate, of course we could always accommodate that with a screening question. Couple more questions. One about archiving of the data. You should be able to access your survey results in perpetuity. That data is available to you, as with all Google products and data. That stuff will be available to you, so you don't have to worry about archiving. And then access to raw data for deeper analytics. We do have that available in our Excel download. And if you're looking for integration across other Google products like Analytics or things like that, we've had some questions come in about that. We don't have much of that yet, but of course, as you can imagine, as our product grows beyond just the 4th month, we are looking to integrate as deeply as we can with other Google products that you all likely know and love from your past experience. There's a question, finally, there seems to be a few folks still on the line, so I'll keep answering as they keep coming. But there is a question about why we can't share the full list of publishers. We are working to collect that data and share it publicly. It's really just out of protection of the privacy of our own publishers. So as we grow and we have a more significant number of publishers, we hope to be able to share that information. It's really just out of protection for them. So that's something that you should definitely expect over time. And we know that you can see them as you browse the internet, but we do hope to publish a full list later this year. Of course, if you want more specific examples, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to give them offline. So I don't know if there are any other questions coming in. So once again, thanks to all of you who were able to attend today. We will be posting this webinar and sharing it for you. We'll probably also be hosting a few more in the coming months. So feel free to share the results of this or the output of this with your teams. And again, feel free to reach out, and we look forward to you guys having a chance to test out the platform. Thanks so much, and everybody have a great rest of your day.